Hi folks. One of my viewers asked for a seasonal guide to working with conifers. So today we're going to talk a little bit about pine trees and about what you should be doing with them as we go through the seasons. So right now here in Southern California it's the middle of fall and the weather's very cool. And with Japanese black pines like this one, and we'll turn it around so you can get a good look at it. With pines like this one, it's not really time to repot the tree yet. This is a time that we do what I like to call fall cleanup. And in this case that means removing the old needles and taking off any wire that was on the tree during the growing season. Now with a tree like this, the wiring has to be cut off. Not a good idea to try to save it. So we typically use a bonsai wire cutter like this one, and we just cut it at each turn and then throw away the pieces. So we'll work around the tree and we'll take off all the wire here. Now some background on this tree. I acquired this tree in 1994 as a 1-gallon nursery specimen, and it looked an awful lot like this little one here, which we're going to pot up a bit later on in today's demonstration. And over the past 16 years we developed it into what you see here now. So let's keep going with the removal of the wiring here. And we'll just keep taking this off. I'm going to kind of work my way up and in, starting with what's most easily accessible, and then just kind of go around. There's no sense in rushing the work on a tree this old. Just take your time. We're just finishing up cleaning all the old needles off of this tree now. And like I said, this is part of the fall cleanup procedure. Here we have quite a pile of wire and old needles. The next thing we want to do is just a little bit of pruning in some strategic locations in order to avoid having problems with growth next spring. For example, going back around to the front of the tree, this branch tip here is definitely way too strong. And if I don't trim it back either now or in the very early spring, I'm going to have a candle going 6 inches high coming out of this by the middle of next spring. So since there's already plenty of foliage here, we'll just take this back right now, and then we'll look around for any other branch tips that look a little too strong, and we'll just take those off. Now I don't like to do a heavy pruning in the fall because we get some fairly moist winters here these days, and there's a fungal disease called needle cast that can affect these trees. I think I'm going to leave these because these can be wired down. Right, so we're going to leave those, and just going to take a quick look around here and get an idea of where else we can cut back a little. And that's about as much as we really need to do right now. Maybe this one here. Maybe that one there. Now I'm going to step back, look at the tree, and I'm feeling pretty good about where it is in terms of what it's going to do next spring, except that it's had its back to the fence for several months now, and the front's looking a little stronger than the back, so when we put it back at its location, we're definitely going to give the back side of it the sunlight for the next several months. Now let's talk a little bit about what we do through the year. This is about as much as we do in the fall. In terms of repotting, and this tree definitely needs it, I was working on the soil earlier and I noticed a very strong root down here right at the edge of the pot. And that's a cue to me that it's time to repot this tree. Here in California, the time window for repotting black pines opens right around Christmas Day, and it closes somewhere around the first or second week of April. That's because we tend to have mild temperatures and, at least for the past several years, a good bit of rainfall during the winters. If you live where it snows, you do not want to repot these while there's any danger of frost, because that will damage the roots after you prune them. But you want to repot them fairly early after the danger of frost is over, because once the warm weather comes, it's too late to repot them. These things are extremely sensitive to temperature when their roots are pruned, so you got to get them root pruned and repotted during the right time of year. In terms of heavy pruning and pruning for shape, I like to do that in the early spring. Some of the old-time bonsai guys, they like to do it in the fall, but I like to do it in the early spring because I like to let these trees carry a fair amount of foliage through the winter. That's because we have wet winters here and we have dangers of fungal diseases, and the more needles they're carrying, the more likely they're still going to be healthy at the end of the winter. And if we're going to do any decandling, we typically do that in the middle of the spring once the candles start to extend, and then we select them. But that's going to be a subject for another video in another time. So let's take a look at our little pine tree now. This is something that I got for free at a bonsai club meeting, and I didn't really know what to do with it, so I just kept it and let it grow for a year. But it occurred to me now that it can be quite useful as a teaching tool, because like I said, a lot of people are going to ask, well, how do I get from here to here? Well, the short answer is it takes a lot of years, but the longer answer is it's easy and it's achievable. It's just a matter of some really simple techniques. The first thing we'll do, pull this out of the pot, and we look at this, and this is a wonderfully healthy tree. It's got a great fungus growth on it, and I'm not even going to disturb this since these things have fairly strong roots. I'm just going to put soil in the new pot, which is a good bit larger, and then we're going to wire the tree into the pot because it has such a small root base relative to the pot. And then we'll let it grow for next year, and we'll come back and shape it in the spring. Okay, so let's get our little pine tree here. And we could even go a little higher there and give it more room. So we'll add just a little more soil. And kind of looking at where do I want the front of the tree here, what do I want to do. We're going to have like a first branch and a back branch down here on the bottom. So this is actually a pretty good angle like this. So we'll just take our wire, and you don't want to wrap this wire around the base of the trunk, because otherwise when it thickens up you'll end up scarring the trunk. So I'm actually going to twist the wires here away from the base of the trunk, then get my wire cutter and cut them. And this one, we'll move that away from the trunk there. And that will just hold the tree in position. And then we'll pull a few needles off the bottoms of the branches, just for sake of appearance. You don't want to do too much of that with a young tree like this, because new buds can come out of the needles, the centers of the clusters of needles, and the more needles you leave on it, the more opportunities you have for new growth. I'm not really going to wire or shape this tree right now because that's not going to do much for it this time of year. What I want to do now is get it established in this pot, and then we're going to return to it somewhere around next March and see if we can do some interesting things with it. Now, if you're a beginner, this is a great way to get started with a Japanese black pine. Simply get a young, small pine like this, get a bonsai pot that's basically oversized for the tree, get the right soil mixture going, pot the tree up in the bonsai pot, and then, you know, you can add a little moss or a few rocks if you want to make it look more natural, look more like a bonsai. But the most important thing is to get it healthy and get it growing, because with Japanese black pines, they are difficult to care for because you have to have the right soil mixture, the right nutrients and everything to keep them healthy, and that's always the first step before you start shaping, before you do something like this, is to learn how to get it growing and keep it healthy. So start with something like this, give it plenty of room, plenty of soil, plenty of nutrients, and just, you know, spend a year or 2 or 3 years if necessary observing it, and then start working on wiring and shaping and pruning, and give it a few more years and you'll start to have something that looks like this. So, thank you for watching, folks.